Hi, I'm Monty the software engineer, and in this video we're going to take the UI that we mocked up in the last video and go ahead and implement that in Qml. I was hoping that by separating the Qml code from the UI mockups would make the videos shorter, around 10-12 minutes each, but I guess I got kind of carried away in the last video. I didn't even put that many screens in, but it ended up being I think over 20 minutes, so hopefully in this video we're not going to go that long, but who knows, we'll see. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new Qt quick application, and we'll call this thermostat example. And then we'll select our kit. All right, so as always, I like to first run the application, make sure everything with my Qt setup is still correct. This looks good, so let's move forward. I'll just change the window to thermostat example. Doesn't really matter, but we'll just do that. All right, so in the last video, I created a folder that contained all the icons I downloaded and put into the UI. So I'll just go ahead and import these into my actual Qt project. Personally, I like to put Qml files into a UI folder as well as icons. So I'll go ahead and make a folder called UI, and then in here I'll also make a new folder called assets, and that's where I like to put icons that I use. You can do it any way you like to, but that's just how I like to do it. I'll go ahead and also add those files to the QRC, add existing files, UI, assets, and then we'll select all these, open, and now it should be here, which is good, and I'll run qmake. Awesome. Okay, so in my video about loaders and stack views, I said that I like to start out applications in a loader, so I'll go ahead and do that. Loader ID main loader. So before I add a new screen, I do like to put screens in their own folders. That just helps a little bit with organization, and in the future when I want to look for a particular screen, I find this to be really helpful. So I'll add a home screen first, and then if we look around, we're also going to have a settings screen, and for the settings screen, this second settings screen, since it's part of this one here, I usually like to keep them in the same folder. Again, helps with organization and finding files in the future. So let's go ahead and add the home screen here. First, let's create a Qml file for that. File, new, Qt, Qml file, and then we're going to say the path of this is going to actually be UI and then home screen. And you can see here, if Qt doesn't find the directory, it's going to be red, and if you read the error message, it says it doesn't exist. But if you put in the right path here, it'll be white, and I'll just call this home screen.qml. Finish. So let's run qmake first, since we've added a new qml file. Here we can see this is good. All right, so for the loader, let's set it equal to UI home screen.qml. And for my home screen, let's add a rectangle, call it the main background. It'll fill with parent, and let's make the color black like it is here. Let's save it and run it, see what happens. So we don't see a black background. Let's see what we did wrong. I'm guessing the loader doesn't fill the parent, and that is correct. All right, now let's see what happens here. Good. Now let's start adding some more of the UI elements. We have this text in the middle here. It looks like it is 200 point font, so let's go ahead and add that. Text ID will be current temp text, and this will be in the center. Let's center in. Our parent color is going to be white. Font.pixel size is going to be 200, and for right now, let's put in some dummy text. and see how that looks. Let's compare that to what we have in here. Looks pretty similar. All right, now let's add the status text here. So we'll call this ID system status. Now it looks like the status text is in the horizontal center of the parent, and it has a top anchor underneath this current temp text. Looks probably about a 40-point margin, so let's go ahead and do that. Anchors, we'll say horizontal center is in the parent horizontal center, and then we'll say the top is underneath the current temp text bottom, and we'll add a top margin of 40. Let's see what the pixel size on that was. This is 30. Font dot pixel size 30, color white. And now again, let's add some dummy text before we implement it in C++. So we'll say heating dot dot dot. All right, let's go ahead and run that. And it looks like the heating text is a little low, so let's bump down that top margin to 20. Let's see what that looks like. It looks better. So next, let's go ahead and add this temperature control here. It looks like it's going to be a customized Qml slider. And if we look here at the Qt documentation, I like to refer to this anytime I'm making customized components. There's a lot of good documentation here on the various Qml components and how to customize them. If we look at the slider, we can see that the slider consists of two visual items, a background and a handle. So let's go ahead and add a new Qml component called temperature control slider, temperature control slider.qml. And we're going to place that within the home screen, since the home screen is the only place that we're going to use the slider. All right, so I mentioned this in a previous video, but if you have Qml components within the same directory, you can just use them in any of the files just by using the name of the file. So like here, temperature control slider. If I go to the home screen, actually first I'll run qmake, and then I'll write down temperature control slider, and there you go. Oops. There you go, and then we'll go ID temperature slider. Now let's go into the temperature control. Now let's go into the temperature control slider. Let's first import Qt quick.controls, and then here we'll remove all this and just make a slider ID temperature control slider. For right now, let's set the slider value to 70, and then for the range, let's just make it go from 55 to 85 for right now. So value 70 from 55 to 85, and the step size will be 1. All right, so the orientation of this is going to be vertical, so let's do that. Orientation, Qt.vertical. And then for the background, it's going to be a white rectangle. So let's put that in there. Background is a rectangle. And the height is going to be the parent height. And the width, let's say, what do we have here? 3. So let's set up our home screen anchors. It has a top and a bottom margin of the parent, and then left is the current temperature text. So let's do anchors, top, parent dot top, bottom, parent dot bottom, left is the current temp text dot right, and let's put margins in of 50. See how that looks. All right, that doesn't look too bad. I do want to move it a little more to the right, as well as make these top and bottom margins a little bigger. So let's see what happens if we change this to 100. All right, so I like where it is this way. Up and down, I kind of want to make it a little bigger. So let's now separate this out. Left margin was 100. Top margin, let's make that 80. Bottom margin, let's also make that 80. Let's see how that looks. Much better. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so if we go back to our temperature control slider and we look at the background that we've set up, I think we need to center it in the parent. So let's try that. Here's our center in parent, and let's see what that looks like. Perfect. So the handle is a circle, and then it has the target temperature in the middle of it. For the circle, it says 76 by 76. So let's try that out. Handle. And to make a circle, we need just to make a rectangle. Let's make the color black. And then a border dot color is going to be white. And then border dot width, we'll say is 3. For the anchors, it's going to be horizontally centered with itself. So we'll put that in there. Horizontal center, parent dot horizontal center. And then for the Y, since it's a vertical slider, it's going to be the temperature control slider dot visual position multiplied by temperature control slider dot available height minus the height. And where I got that from, I looked at the documentation here, and for their horizontal slider, for the handle, that the X equal to the control dot visual position times control dot available width minus width. So I just translated that into a Y motion. And now let's set up the width and the height. Width, it was 76. Height was 76. And then to make it a circle, we'll just say width divided by 2. Now let's see how that looks. And it's blank, so something went wrong. Let's look at our application output. The temperature control slider is unavailable. Horizontal center is a read-only property. All right, so it's supposed to be anchors.horizontal center. So let's try that. Cool. And we can see here that it moves as well. So that's good. I think that matches with our mock pretty well. Oops. Probably make it a little smaller. Let's see. Actually looks pretty good. So I'll just keep it as is. Now to add the text within the handle, let's just add a component here. Text, and this will be centered in the parent, which is the handle itself. Anchors.center in parent, and we'll say that the color is white and the font.pixel size, let's refer to the Figma doc. We have that set to 30. So let's go put that in. And then for the text, we'll just say that it is equal to temperature control slider dot value. All right, so let's run that and see how it looks. All right, that looks pretty good. We have our text here, and let's just make sure it updates when we go up and down, and it does. So that looks pretty good. So the next step is going to be adding these two icons here. We'll go back to our home screen. So let's add an image, and we'll call this the heat cool select icon. And if we look at it, it has a top anchor that matches the top of the temperature control slider, and then a right anchor that's probably the same amount of distance away as this is from the current temp text. So let's try and add that in there, see how it looks. So anchors, top is going to be temperature slider dot top, and then on the right we'll say is current temp text dot left, and then for the right margin, we have a left margin here is 100, so we'll just match that with this. And if we look at the icon's dimensions, we have 70 by 70 here. So let's go ahead and say width is 70, height is 70. And then for the source, let's open up the assets over here, and let's copy the flame for right now, copy the URL and put that in here. And now let's see how this looks. Good. Now let's do the same thing with the settings icon. We'll just copy and paste this. And then this will be just called the settings icon. And instead of the top, we'll just make this the bottom margin. And then this is the settings. So we'll make that change and let's see how that looks. Good. All right, now let's add a semi-functional C++ backend that will give us a lot of these UI elements so they're not just dummied in here for right now. So let's go ahead and do File, New, C++ class. And we don't want to put it in the UI folder. I'll actually make a new folder in the project. I'll call this new folder and we'll say controllers. And we'll put the C++ object in there, controllers, and it will inherit the Q object. So if we look at where we currently are, I'm seeing that we'll probably want 3 or 4 different properties. One that controls the current temperature, the target temperature, the status message, and then probably the state, whether it's heating, cooling, or in the auto mode. So let's go ahead and add that. All right, now let's go ahead and add our Q properties. We're going to want to add an int that will have the current system temperature, enter. And actually a trick that I learned while making these videos from a viewer named Tom Betka, hope I'm pronouncing that right, is if you right click on the Q property, hit refactor, and hit generate missing Q property members, Qt Creator will actually go ahead and add all the missing functions that you need to make this Q property functional. Now it added everything to the header file. I generally like to keep implementation into the C++ file. So let's go ahead and just do that real quick. I'll cut that, add a semicolon, and then refactor, put this in here, paste it, and then I'll go ahead and do that to the rest of them. Good. For the actual variable member, I do like to keep that private. So let's just do that real quick. All right, now I'll go ahead and add the rest of the Q properties. So I've gone ahead and added the Q properties I think I need. Current system temperature, the target temp, a system status message. But I think it'll be helpful to also add a state for what the system controller is currently doing, heating, cooling, or in auto mode. So let's go ahead and add an enum. We'll just call it heat select state. And we'll add heating, cooling, or auto. And to make that accessible, we'll use the key enum macro, and it's a heat select state. Let's see if we can add a Q property that would return the heat select state. And then we'll say, and we'll call it system state. And then let's also do that same trick here. Now let's go ahead and add defaults to the constructor here. Let's say that the current system temperature is going to be 65 degrees. The target temperature is going to be 70. The status message is going to say heating. And then the state, system state, is going to be heating. All right, now let's add some semi-functional logic here in private. Let's say void check system status, and then we'll add this in here. All right, now let's make it say if the system temperature is less than the target temp and the system state is equal to heating, then we'll want to set the system status message to heating. Oops. If the current system temperature is greater than the target temp and the system state is equal to cooling, we'll set the system status message to cooling. And let's just do else, and then else we'll just set the system status message to holding. Now we're going to want to call this check system status anytime the system state is changed or whenever the target temperature is changed. So let's add that in here. Right here, we'll do check system status, and then we'll also add that to the set target temp. All right, now let's go back to our main.cpp. We'll add this class to it. So let's go here. And we're going to include controllers, system controller, and then let's register as a type. Register type, system controller. We'll call it Monty 1.0, and then we'll call it system controller. And then I can go ahead in my main.qml here. I'll import my Monty package. Here I'll use the component system controller ID, and we'll just call it system controller. Now if we go to the home screen, we can go ahead and start adding those Q properties in. All right, so let's make this system controller dot current system temperature. Now let's run that. Let's run qmake first, and then we'll run it. Let's make sure it works, and boom, that's good. So let's update everything else. I will put the system controller header file here so that I can see what I should name things. Heating is going to be system controller dot system status message. For the heat cool select icon, let's add some stuff in here. Source will be if system controller dot system state equals to 0, which is heating. Then we will return this right here. Copy URL. Let's do return. Do that, and then let's copy and paste this. And then for 1, it will be ice crystal. And then for 2, it will be auto. For the temperature slider, let's go ahead and set the value to system controller dot target temp. And then in the temperature control slider itself, let's get rid of this initial value here, and let's run that. This is 70, this is 65, heating. Good. Now let's edit this, make sure that this works. This should now remove this and set it to holding, which it isn't. So I think here we need to add an on value changed. And we'll set system controller dot set target temp to value. All right, let's close this and let's run that. All right, now what happens if we go here? Yep, you can see it says holding, but if we move it up, it'll go back to heating. Perfect. All right, next let's add this heating select pop up here. I'm thinking it's going to be a dynamic object that pops up, and then if you click one of these options, it'll set the state of the system to one of these 3. I'll probably add a mouse area around all here, so if you click around here, it'll just close this automatically without updating the system status. So let's go ahead and add a new QML file for that. I'm going to keep it in the same folder as the home screen again, just because it will only be used on the home screen. So we'll just call this heat select dialog.qml. Finish. And the way I'm going to do this, I think I'm going to add a rectangle that fills up this whole entire screen, then a mouse area, and then an inner rectangle. So let's go ahead and do that. This will be the rectangle, and we'll call this the main background. Anchors.fill, make it fill the parent, and then the color, I'm going to make it see-through. Q.RGBA 0000. All right, now let's add a mouse area that fills the parent. And then an inner rectangle. ID inner rectangle. And let's see, this will be about, let's try 80% and then 50%. So width, parent dot width divided by 2, and then height, parent dot height times 0.8. And let's make that color black with a border dot color of white and border dot width. What was that? This was 3. Cool. All right, now let's add that to our home screen. We'll do a var heat select dialog holder, and we'll set that to null. Property. All right, and then we'll add a function, create heat select dialog. And then we'll first check if the heat select dialog holder is equal to null. And if it is, let's go ahead and do var component equals qt.create component of the heat select dialog.qml. And then we'll say heat select dialog holder is equal to the component.create object. We'll put it within here, and we'll just give this the ID of home screen so that we can give this home screen, and then x equals to 0, y equals to 0, and then if heat select dialog holder, then heat select dialog holder dot anchors dot fill, and we'll have it fill the home screen. Equals. All right, now let's add a function that will destroy the heat select dialog, and we'll check if heat select dialog holder is not equal to null. If it isn't equal to null, then we'll say heat select dialog holder dot destroy, and then we'll set the heat select dialog holder equal to null. All right, so in the heat select dialog, let's add a signal, destroy me. And if it's clicked anywhere around the mouse area, we'll just say on clicked main background dot destroy me. Let's just name this heat select dialog to make it a little more relevant. And then the home screen, we'll say heat select dialog holder dot destroy me dot connect to the destroy heat select dialog. All right, and now let's add in the icon, which is right here, a mouse area, which fills the parent, which is the heat select icon itself. And on clicked, we will say create heat select dialog. Now, since we added a new QML file, heat select dialog, I like to run qmake. And then now let's try that out. All right, so now if we click this, the pop-up should appear. It does. It's not set right. I don't think I put it in the center, but let's just click this and it's destroyed. Create it again, destroyed. Good. So let's edit this. This rectangle should be within the center of its parent. Center in, parent, and let's try that again. Let's click this. Perfect. One thing I forgot to do was to make this a rounded edge. So let's add that in. Radius 5. Let's just make sure that looks okay. We hit this and it looks good. If we click out of it, good. If we click it again, click it again. All right, so now let's go ahead and add these options here, the heat, cool, and auto. First, we're going to add a list model ID, and we'll call this the heat model. And then in here, we're going to add some list elements. Here we'll add a list element. We'll say text is going to be heat. And we'll add 2 more, one for cool and one for auto. And then let's add a list view. ID, we'll just call this the heat list view. And then we will have it fill, anchors.fill, the inner rectangle. For the model, we'll use the heat model. And for the delegate, which is how we draw out each individual item, let's start with a rectangle. And the width is going to be the inner rectangle.width. And then since we have 3 of them, I'll just make the height equal to 1/3 of it. So height is going to be inner rectangle.height divided by 3. Let's set the color to black. And then to make these separators, I'll just do a border.color is white. What do we have this for? This is 4. So then border.width, let's do 4, and let's add a radius of 5 on it. And then let's add the text, and this will be in the center of the parent, which is the rectangle. Text color will be white. The font.pixel size will be 42. And the text we'll just say is text, and it will grab the list model's text value here. So let's go ahead and run that, see what it looks like. Open this up and it's blank. Let's see why that is. All right, so I think it's the Z order here. So let's put the list view after the rectangle so that the rectangle is not on top of the list view. Let's hit this. All right, so we can see we have the separators here, meaning the list view is being shown, but for some reason the text isn't showing up. Let's see, color's white. All right, so I think this here is a problem since this text component has a member called text. This might be confusing, so let's do control text instead of text. And set this to control text instead. Let's hit run. Let's open up the heating. And yes, we have the heat, cool, and auto. So now all we have to do is add the actions for that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do a mouse area, which fills the parent. Let's add an on-clicked signal here. And let's say if control text equals to heat, then we will say system controller dot set system state to 0, which corresponds to this right over here, our enum 0, and then 1 is cooling, 2 is auto. So let's go ahead and do that. Else if this is cool, set it to 1, 2, auto, else if, all right, and then after that we will want to emit the signal heat select dialog dot destroy me. Now let's go ahead and try that out. So if we click this, we select cool, we can see that this here has changed to the snow icon. The temperature is lower than the set point, so let's set this down, and now it's cooling. I don't think we have anything set up for auto. Nope, so let's go and add that in real quick in our check system status. So let's add it here. We'll say else if current state is equal to auto. Oops, we can just do auto here. Then we will want it to either heat or cool depending on what it is. So if the system temperature is less than the target temp, then we will want to heat up the system. So set system status message to heating, else if the current system temperature is greater than the M target temp, we will want to set the system status message to cooling ... and then otherwise we can just assume that the system is holding. All right, now let's try that out. Make sure our auto state works. So here we have it heating. Let's bring it down. It's holding. And if we go to auto, it's cooling. And if we bring this up, it's heating. Otherwise, let's try to make it the same temperature, and it's holding. So that works well. All right, so I feel like this video is already going to be a long one. Hopefully it isn't, but if it is, I do apologize about that. If these videos are too long and you think that I should be kind of just fast forwarding through the code, or maybe have the C++ object already created, definitely let me know. I don't want to make these videos too long and boring. But let's go ahead and add now this settings screen. So I'm thinking that whenever we hit the settings button, it's going to change the main loader. If we recall, this whole screen is in a loader itself. I'm thinking about adding another screen that has a stack view inside of it. That way when we click one of these, this will be popped onto the stack. I think I'm going to add a back button or something like that, so that when we hit it, it'll just pop the stack and bring us back to this main screen. That way when we click it, it'll just bring us back here, and then when we click it again, it'll set the loader back to this home screen. So let's go ahead and do that. So I do have in my UI folder a settings screen folder already. So let's add file new Qt Qml file, and then in here we'll change this to UI, and then settings screen. And we'll call this settings screen.qml, and then we'll hit next, finish, and then to test that out, let's go to home screen. Let's add a mouse area here, and then we'll do anchors.fill parent, and on clicked we will set the main loader .source equal to, and if we recall that this file here, home screen, is in this home screen folder, so we'll go up one directory into the settings screen folder, and then we'll call the settings screen.qml. Let's add a way to go back to this home screen in the settings screen here. So I'll go to flat icon. Let's look for a back button real quick. I like this one, so let's go ahead and just download this real quick. I'll add that into my assets folder, and then in Qml QRC, I'll just add an existing file, and we'll add that previous button, which is right here. Let's run Qmake real quick, and then in my settings screen, let's make this a rectangle. Which is, I'll just call this the settings screen. We'll make this black and fill the parent. And let's add that previous button. So ID, back button. We'll make the anchors left, parent.left, top, parent.top. And let's try to make that button 40, height 40. Now I'm just making this up off the top of my head, only because we don't have it here. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Source, and then we want to grab the previous button. Let's put that in here. And let's put a mouse area that fills up the image. And on clicked, we will have the main loader dot source equal to up one to home screen directory, and then home screen.qml. So let's try that out. Hit the settings button. Here we can see the back button, and if we click that, it brings us back to the home screen. And I believe since I have the system controller located in my main.qml in the same area as the loader, it should maintain the state actually. So let's try that out real quick. What I mean by that is if we set this to 82 and this to cool, for example, and then we go to the settings screen and go back, everything should be maintained. All right, so let's add here real quick a margin. So margins 10, only because the back button looked like it was butt up right against the top left corner, and we don't really like that. So now let's go ahead and look at what we have for the settings screen. So here I'm going to make a rectangle with a white border. I'm going to probably set it to 80% of the width and the height and centered. So let's go ahead and do that. Rectangle ID, and we'll just call it the stack view background. And let's say width is parent.width times 0.8, height parent.height times 0.8, and anchors dot center in, the parent color black, border dot width, what was this, 3, border dot color, and white. And let's see how that looks. The settings screen, that looks pretty good. I might even make it a little smaller, and then let's remember to round our corners here. So let's do 0.7, 0.7, and then let's add a radius of 5. Let's run it real quick, hit the settings, and this looks much better. All right, so now let's first add a stack view that fills up this whole entire stack view holder. I think first we need to import Qt quick.controls, and now let's add the stack view ID, and we'll just call it stack view. Actually, let's call it settings stack view, and then we'll put this anchors.fill into the stack view background. Stack view background. All right, now let's first add a component that will be the first main menu. So file, new file project, Qt, Qml, and in our settings screen, and we'll just call this settings main menu.qml. Let's go ahead and grab what we had for the heat select dialog here. This looked pretty good. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to put it in the main menu. I'm just going to do this. Let's make this anchors.fill parent. And we'll call this the settings list view. We can remove all of this. And then this will fill the parent. And then let's add a list model. And we'll call this ID settings main menu list model. And we'll have a list element. And then let's call this menu text. Let's look at what we have. We have temperature units, temperature units. Let's copy and paste this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So 4. This one was schedule. This one was Wi-Fi settings. Wi-Fi settings. And this one was about. Now that we have 4 items, we don't want this to be divided by 3. Also, we don't have an inner rectangle anymore, so let's just do parent, and then the text is going to be menu text, and then let's see what the text size was. That was 30, so we'll change this to 30, and then the model as well is going to be our settings main menu list model. Now let's run Qmake real quick since we added a new file. Let's set this to initial item is going to be settings main menu.qml. Now let's see how that looks. Settings. All right, this is all here. This is good. It's not positioned correctly. Let's see what I did. All right, so instead of having this stack view background here, it's not really working for me. For the stack view, we'll have it fill the parent, which is the settings screen, and then our main menu. Let's put this here, and then this will fill anchors.fill stack view background. And then let's set this to reference the actual list view, and let's run that, see how that works. And then we'll hit settings. All right, much better. Now let's go ahead and add the icons in here. Once we add the icons in here, we can then just set the text to offset from the icon, which should line them all up. Let's add a new element in here, and we'll call it icon source. And then we'll just grab one of these. Thermometer, I think, was one of them. So we'll copy that, put it in here, and then add this to all the other ones. Schedule was calendar. Wi-Fi settings is Wi-Fi. And then about is the info button. All right, now let's add the image itself to the delegate. Image, and then for the image we will want it to be vertically centered in here, and then we'll give it a little bit of a left margin. So let's go ahead and do that. Anchors, vertical center, parent.vertical center, and then we will add a left, parent.left, and the parent is referring to the rectangle delegate itself, not the actual list view. That's why these should work here pretty well. And then the left margin, let's try 30. And then source, let's go and say it's the icon source. And then for the dimensions, let's look it up. We have set it to 48. So height 48, width 48. Oh. And then we'll name this ID, icon, image. And then for the text, we can actually change this anchor to anchors. We'll match the vertical center, parent.vertical center. Left, we'll put to the icon image.right. And then the left margin, let's give it 40 as well. See how that looks. And now let's run it. Let's hit settings. And this looks pretty good. The only thing is if we flick it, we can see that doesn't look good. So we can just change that by setting the interactive on this, interactive to false. And now that should disable the flickable. Yes, so it's no longer flicking. And now let's just add this last screen here, made by Monty the software engineer. This is going to reuse this, so we can just copy and paste a lot of this. File, new file, Qml. Let's call this the about page.qml. Let's go to our main menu, and we can copy and paste this in here. We don't need the list view, nor do we need this list model. And we'll just call this the about page background. Actually, we can just use this. And then let's make these buttons. On clicked, we will say this settings stack view. Let's actually just copy, paste that, dot push. And we want to push on it the about page.qml. And now let's run that. settings, about. We can see there's that transition here. This back button is still visible, so we will actually use that to pop this. So let's go ahead and do that. About page first, let's add the text in there. We won't go too crazy. Let's look at what we have for the text. This is going to be left and top, made by Monty the software engineer, and the text size is 30. So anchors, top, parent dot top, left, parent dot left. Let's do a left margin of 40 and a top margin of 60. I'm just making that up from what it looks like. Color white, pixel size was 30. Oops. Font dot pixel size is 30, and then text we will say made by Monty the software engineer. And then developed using Qt/QML. Alright, so now let's change the functionality of the back button. On clicked, let's make it first check if settings stack view dot depth greater than or equal to 2. So the first item, once you put it on there, the depth will equal to 1, and then anytime you add push anything else onto the stack view, it'll just increase it by 1. So let's check to make sure. If it's greater than or equal to 2, we want it to settings.stackview.pop. Else we can just say mainloader.source equal to the home screen, and then let's close our on clicked and try that out. So let's hit the settings. Here we can see our various settings. They all lead to the same page. They should. Yep. So made by Monty the software engineer. If we hit back, it should pop it. Yep. And then back again should bring us back here. Now we have all this functioning as well. So that was taking our mockup from Figma and developing a Qt QML application from that. As you can see, we have a semi-functional C++ backend. So I think this is going to be a long video just from what I see from the recording software and how much time has passed. So I'm sorry if it was too long. Let me know again if it's too long. Parts of it need to be sped up to make it more watchable. That's definitely feedback that I would appreciate. Thank you very much. So real quick, I actually finished recording all the footage for this video, but while I was outside with my dogs, I couldn't help but think about some of the things I usually add to buttons that I didn't do here. So I wanted to add them real quick, otherwise I would have watched the video later and thought, man, I should have really added that in there. So one thing here, let's put on this mouse area, let's name this the ID main button, and then in the mouse area on pressed, we'll say main button dot color equals white, and then we'll do the right here ID main text dot color equals black, and then we'll do the same thing except for on released. We'll set this back to black and this back to white, and let's add that same thing to the heat select dialog here, and then we'll name this main text, and then this ID main button, and then we'll also want to make this flickable or interactive false. So it is also not flickable. And then real quick, let's run that. Settings, and now if we press and hold this, you can see that this turns white. Just gives it a better look and feel, that you know that you're actually hitting something right there. And then also here, this as well.